The lowering sun cast long shadows across the empty fields as John pulled up to the old farmhouse. He cut the engine and stepped out of his beat-up truck, breathing deep the fresh country air. Anything was an improvement over the noisy city he'd fled, seeking solace in pastoral isolation. Circling the peeling white wooden structure, John surveyed the weed-choked acreage stretching endlessly into twilight. Scraps of barbed wire fences encircled remnants of overgrown pastures, remnants of a bygone era when livestock grazed these empty plains. Now only crows and bats disturbed the stillness, fluttering in from rookeries hidden somewhere on the darkening property. John spent the first hours clearing debris and making a cursory sweep inside the musty farmhouse. Though rundown, it was sturdier than most cabins for sale in the area. Beneath the grime, the basic construction seemed sound. After lighting a fire in the hearth, John set about cooking a meager meal of canned vegetables as darkness swallowed the land. Though exhaustion dragged at him, sleep would not come easily in this strange new place. In the dead of night, restless wanderings led John out onto the back porch, shivering against the chill. Pale moonlight revealed crumbling stone outbuildings half reclaimed by encroaching wild rose brambles and briars. Strange shadows flickered at the edge of vision, alive with phantom movements. A crow cawed mournfully in the distance, the haunting call carrying on the still air. Drawn onward, John retrieved a flashlight and ventured deeper into the overgrown fields. Twisted trees stood like sentinels in a grove behind the house, gnarled boughs swaying faintly in the breeze. Pushing through grasping branches, the beam fell upon a weathered wooden cover partially obscured by leaf litter and grasping vines. John cleared away the debris to reveal a massive stone well, its rough-hewn sides rising from the soil in concentric rings, tightening into darkness. Peering down, John saw only empty blackness extending without end. The circular rim was wide enough to comfortably seat several people, though now it bore only choked weeds and scuttling insects disturbed by the flashlight's probing beam. Something about the place gave John an uneasy feeling that prickled at the base of his neck. All the same, curiosity overcame caution as scenarios unfolded in his mind of what mysteries this well might hold after untold decades of disuse. On his way back to the house, John's light passed over an aging tool shed tucked in a corner of the yard. Rusty implements hung from peeling paint inside, but one item caught his eye. A thick hemp rope coiled on a shelf, still sturdy despite its age. An idea took hold that he couldn't shake, feeding his restless mind. What lay at the bottom of that darkness? Could he drag some unknown secret into the light? Later that night found John returning with rope in hand. Adjusting the flashlight between his teeth, he expertly threw a loop at the top of the well and secured it around a sturdy, gnarled branch. Taking a deep breath, John began descending step by slow step into the abyss, playing out the rope as he went. The darkness closed in swiftly, the pale circle of the heavens and treetops shrinking to nothing above. His feet occasionally kicked loose pebbles that rattled endlessly into the void below, fading without ever striking bottom. A dank, earthy smell rose to meet him as John kept going, descending deeper than any should dare. Vines threatened to tangle around his limbs, but he pressed determinedly onward into the murk. At last the rope went slack, signifying John had reached the terminus. But as his feet touched down, a viscous coating slicked the stones underfoot that shone jet black under the flashlight's beam. John crouched to dip his fingers into the strange, unknown residue, bringing it to his nose for a cautious sniff. An acrid chemical scent assaulted his nostrils unlike anything natural. Wiping his fingers clean on his jeans, John aimed the light around with growing unease. A slick discoloration stained the walls in a ring extending skyward, as if some immense, sinister shape had risen from the depths just beneath. What entity might leave such a calling card? A thrill of unexpected excitement coursed through John's veins, even as alarm bells rang distantly in his mind. This, surely, was no ordinary well, but held mysteries untold. As he prepared to look further, a faint scrabbling noise drifted down to meet his straining ears. John froze, heart lurching into his throat, as the rope above his head went suddenly, dreadfully slack. Trapped in the darkness, John began clawing frantically at the slick stone walls. "Help!" he screamed, heedless of the rawness clawing at his throat. Only his echoing cries answered back in the endless gloom. The meager circle of light from his discarded flashlight barely penetrated the inky murk, leaving John all but blind. He kicked and scrabbled at the walls like a caged animal, desperation fueling his aching muscles. How deep was this pit? Had anyone ever escaped such an entombment? Halting to catch his breath, John strained his ears once more. Faint scratchings emanated from below, an awful skittering that raised the fine hairs along his flesh. His memory conjured phantom glimpses in the light, that chemical slick staining the ancient stones. What ungodly entity left its residue behind? Pressing his ear tightly to the damp wall, John focused past his racing heartbeat. The sounds seemed to be steadily ascending, clawing closer through unfathomable depths. A sob escaped his raw throat, unbidden as terror threatened to overwhelm rational thought. Trapped alone in this Stygian tomb, with something unknown, something primal, clawing its way toward the light and its newfound prey. In desperation, John kicked again at the walls with renewed vigor. His fingers found purchase in crumbling mortar between stones, giving way under his scrabbling. A flicker of hope swelled in his breast. Was escape possible through this higher ring? Pebbles rained down into the void as John redoubled his efforts, prying stones free one by painful one. The scrabbling from below was louder now, closer. John could swear he heard rasping breath, mingled with an awful hissing. Memories suddenly surfaced of tabloid articles describing fads, befallen those few souls, foolhardy enough to delve where they didn't belong. Tales of nameless terrors lurking in antiquity's dark places, preying on human curiosities. With a wrench and a cascade of rubble, a stone suddenly dislodged in John's white-knuckled grip. Falling into the void, it rattled endlessly, but gave John hope. The hole was just large enough to squeeze through. Pressing his ear once more to the wall, the source of that awful scraping was near enough now to discern individual claws scraping against stone. Twisting around, John shoved with all his might against the ragged hole. Loose rubble tumbled free, and he squeezed through with grinding effort, fingers bleeding but alive with adrenaline. Rolling onto the ledge beyond, he sucked in great lungfuls of dank air, but no time remained to rest. A hideous shriek rang out from the depths below, shattering the silence into a million pieces. Whatever entity inhabited that lightless pit had reached the source of the commotion. Shakily getting to his feet, John ran the mental calculation on a desperate gambit. A 20-foot drop separated him from salvation, above should he opt to climb, leaving behind only death by unfathomable dark below. A hissing bellow shook the walls, bringing loose pebbles raining down as the entity sensed its quarry's escape. Heart in his throat, John steeled himself for the leap of faith into a precarious descent toward daylight, or toward doom should he fail to catch hold. At his back, An unholy scrabbling heralded the approach of something nightmarish into the weak ring of light. With a sobbing breath, John jumped. Fingers caught purchase against jagged stone, tearing skin but holding firm. John's full weight swung precariously as below. He felt more than heard an impossible shape hurl itself against the wall in blind rage. Slithering and scraping, faded slowly into the depths as the entity fell back, baffled in its domain. Shaking with effort and panic, John began inching his way skyward through a stinging ladder of ribbons and blood. After an eternity, his scrabbling hand broke free into open sky. Arms reached down to grasp his wrist and drag the sobbing, gibbering man to safety under the stars. Was this hell truly left behind in that lightless place, or would its denizen have the last laugh, yet echoing from the bottomless pit John had so foolishly unleashed? He couldn't say, and feared to find out. With shuddering breaths, John allowed his rescuers to load him into a waiting ambulance as dawnlight suffused the farm. Paramedics fussed over his hands and feet, crisscrossed with angry red cuts, while bombarding him with questions. He answered mechanically, the memories of that lightless ordeal folding inward, sealing behind a door in his mind. In the ER, medics stitched his battered flesh with antiseptic fire. But no amount of salves could ease John's racing thoughts. What had he unleashed upon this place, in stirring that long-buried abomination from its Stygian slumber? Would that blight continue to fester and spread, poisoning the earth? He felt eyes watching even sheltered within sterile walls, belonging to something not meant for mortal sight. Days passed in a haze of fitful nightmares. As wounds healed, John began piecing together fragments from his delirium, down in the frigid dark. Impossibly long limbs sheathed in oily scales had scrabbled up the stone walls, borne by a thrashing serpentine tail. Lidless eyes gazed with phosphorescent malice, drinking in the fear of prey turned. There in the lightless depths, it waited for careless souls lured by imaginings of treasure or spirits. Recovery came gradually, alongside a gnawing obsession for answers. Consulting musty records down dusty rural library islas, John pieced in together whispers of antique hovels once worshipped by settlers before civilization's march. A serpent deity born of primal nightmares, demanding flesh offerings of young cattle or children to sate its subterranean hunger. Had John unearthed the remnant of those blasphemies, long thought forgotten or repressed? Under cover of night, John returned to the farm with lantern in hand. Anthropic energies stirred in his veins, driving him to confront the aberration he'd loosed like an ancient curse upon the land, threading through dead briars beneath a starless midnight sky. That frigid grip of anxiety closed around John's heart once more. Had that lightless entity followed him from the pit, manifesting a more mundane physical form to fulfill the ancient rites? At the well's edge, John doused his lantern and cast thin beams down into the light-absorbing throat. Listening intently revealed only skitterings of disturbed insects and pebbles jostling endlessly into nothingness. Steeling his resolve, John tied sturdy rope around a twisted oak and began his descent once more, deeper into freezing pitch. Only John's ragged breaths disturbed the tomb-like stillness. Lantern light danced upon age-blackened crags as he lowered, seeking any sign of the blasphemous presence, but finding only the maddening dark. His pounding heart calmed somewhat, with no slithering touch emerging from the abyss. Had the entity truly returned below to its obsidian slumber? At the rounded sump, long haunted by chemical taint, John sat down with a shiver. Only dust motes danced under lantern glow, undisturbed for untold ions. In that moment, an epiphany struck like lightning. He alone had conjured their dreadful encounter. weaving fear and half-remembered mythologies into a living hell. With a laugh that echoed endlessly down unplumbed depths, John realized the only true terror was that which mankind created within. Ascending with newfound calm, John broke at the farmhouse's door from its frame and with lantern light fed the fires that would reduce its remains to ashes. Come dawn, he cleaned his pickup and drove free under open sky, leaving the scourge of that abandoned well and its imaginings buried forevermore in cindered ruin. Whether future souls might stir its malefic slumber and face phantoms of their own devising, John dared not dwell. His past was burned away, leaving only promise of serenity and the future an empty page awaiting its unwritten tale. Thanks for listening to this story. Put a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories.